Imagine uncovering a dark family secret that shatters everything you believe in. A truth so deep, so carefully hidden, that the mere thought of it makes your stomach turn. A truth that was never meant to be found. But sometimes, the past refuses to stay buried. Sometimes, the answers we seek come at a cost we never could have imagined. It started with a question, simple, harmless, the kind of question families brush aside without a second thought. But this time, there was no brushing it aside. A missing detail in an old story. A hesitation in a mother's voice. A photograph that didn't quite fit. At first, it was nothing. At least, that's what Ethan told himself. But once you start seeing cracks, you can't unsee them. And once you start asking questions, the answers have a way of changing everything. For years, Margaret Thompson was the mother who had all the answers. The warm, steady presence who kept everything in place. The person who made the world feel safe. Until the moment she didn't. Until the moment Ethan realized there was something she wasn't saying. He was done letting it go. He was done pretending he didn't notice the unease in her eyes when certain topics came up. Done accepting the half-truths, the vague explanations, the carefully chosen words that never quite answered the question. The confrontation was inevitable. A son demanding the truth. A mother with nowhere left to hide. No more excuses. No more carefully controlled stories. Just the truth. And then, just minutes later, she was gone. A tragedy. A mystery. A family secret so powerful that it ended with a body on the floor. But was it just an unfortunate coincidence? Or was the truth so dangerous that it cost Margaret her life? If you love gripping true crime stories, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. Maplewood wasn't the kind of town where things like this happened. It was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other by name, where people left their doors unlocked, where life moved at a steady, predictable pace. Families grew old in the same houses their parents and grandparents once lived in. Stories were passed down, traditions were kept alive, and secrets, well, secrets had a way of staying buried. For the Thompson family, life had always been steady. Margaret Thompson was well respected, a teacher at the local elementary school, known for her patience and kindness. She raised her children with quiet strength, always providing, always knowing the right thing to say. To the outside world, she was everything a mother should be. But inside the walls of their home, something was off. Ethan had always felt it. A distance, a hesitation, something just beneath the surface that he could never quite put his finger on. He had learned not to ask too many questions. He had learned that certain topics made his mother uncomfortable. He had learned to let things go. Until the day he couldn't anymore. It started with a box. A simple, unmarked cardboard box tucked away in the attic, covered in years of dust. Ethan hadn't been looking for it. He had been searching for an old photo album, a piece of the past to hold on to. Instead, he found something that changed everything. Inside the box were papers, letters, documents, old photographs. They weren't labeled, weren't meant to be found. But as Ethan sifted through them, a pattern started to form. Dates that didn't match up. Names he didn't recognize. And then, the photograph. A black and white picture of his mother, much younger, standing next to a man Ethan had never seen before. She looked different. Not just younger, but different. Something in her eyes, something unreadable. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't posing. She wasn't looking at the camera. It was as if she hadn't even known the picture was being taken. Ethan turned it over, his heart pounding. A date. A name. A location that didn't make sense. If you love gripping true crime stories, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. Ethan Thompson had always been the kind of person who needed answers. It was part of who he was, his way of making sense of the world. As a software engineer, his job revolved around logic, structure, and problem solving. When something didn't add up, he couldn't just ignore it. It gnawed at him, kept him up at night, pushed him to dig deeper until everything fit into place. And for as long as he could remember, there had always been something about his family that didn't quite fit. His childhood had been stable, normal, the kind most people would envy. His mother, Margaret, was the foundation of it all. She had raised him and his younger sister, Sarah, with patience and warmth. Their father had died in a car accident when Ethan was 10, leaving Margaret to take on both parental roles. And she did, gracefully, without complaint. She worked long hours as a schoolteacher, yet she never missed a parent-teacher meeting, never forgot a birthday, never let them feel the weight of what they had lost. But even as a child, Ethan could sense something beneath the surface. A tension in his mother's voice when certain topics came up. A moment of hesitation when asked about her past. He learned to recognize the way her smile would falter, just for a second, before she changed the subject. And he learned, as most children do, not to push. Sarah was different. 3 years younger, she had never questioned anything. To her, their mother was perfect, unshakable, someone who could do no wrong. If Margaret had secrets, Sarah didn't want to know. She wasn't like Ethan, she didn't need to dissect things, didn't need everything to make sense. She took things as they were, accepting the life they had without second-guessing it. Which was why, when Margaret died, Sarah refused to believe there was anything more to the story. It was a tragedy, yes. But tragedies happen. People collapse. Hearts fail. That's all there was to it. But Ethan couldn't accept that. Not after what he had found. Not after the way she had reacted when he confronted her. It wasn't just shock. It wasn't just grief. It was fear. And fear meant something. Then there was Detective Laura Martinez. She had been working homicide for over 15 years, long enough to know that nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. When she arrived at the Thompson house that night, she saw what everyone else saw, a grieving son, a tragic death, a case that should have been open and shut. A heart attack. An unfortunate, natural end. But something about Ethan's face gave her pause. There was something in his eyes, in the way he spoke, in the way his hands trembled when he tried to explain what had happened. Something unsettled. Something unresolved. She had seen it before, the way people looked and they knew there was more to the story but didn't know how to prove it. And so, she did what she always did. She listened. At first, the details seemed unremarkable. A confrontation between mother and son. A sudden collapse. No history of heart problems, but nothing overtly suspicious either. Still, something about the way Margaret had fallen, the way Ethan described it, didn't sit right with her. People don't just die like that. Not without warning. Not without cause. And then there was the box. The papers. The photograph. Pieces of a puzzle that didn't yet make sense. Martinez knew one thing for sure. If Margaret Thompson had died with a secret, it was Ethan who had come the closest to uncovering it. And that meant one thing, he might be in danger, too. If you love gripping true crime stories, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. Ethan had always felt that there were things about his family that didn't add up, but life had a way of keeping him too distracted to dwell on them for long. Work, bills, responsibilities. There was always something more pressing than digging into half-forgotten memories and childhood suspicions. But that changed the night he found the letters. He hadn't been searching for anything in particular. He had been in the attic, looking for an old photo album his mother had mentioned, when he stumbled upon a small, wooden box wedged behind a row of dusty storage bins. It was locked, but the latch was old and brittle, and with little effort, it snapped open. Inside, he found a bundle of aged envelopes, some addressed to his mother, others written in her handwriting. The ink had faded, but the words were still legible, and as he read them, the air seemed to shift around him, growing heavier with each passing second. The letters spoke of a past Ethan had never known. Mentions of names he didn't recognize. A time before he was born. Some of the letters were desperate, pleading. Others short, clipped, like someone trying to erase a connection they could never fully sever. But one phrase, repeated more than once, sent a chill through him. It was never supposed to happen like this. By the time he reached the last letter, his hands were shaking. He didn't know exactly what he had uncovered, but one thing was clear: his mother had been hiding something, something big. And whatever it was, she had gone to great lengths to bury it. He couldn't ignore it. Not this time. That evening, he sat across from Margaret in the dimly lit living room, the letters spread out between them like pieces of a shattered truth. He didn't accuse. He didn't yell. He just asked, who had written them? What did they mean? Why had she kept them hidden? At first, she said nothing. She just stared at the letters, her expression unreadable. Then, she took a deep breath, and for the first time in Ethan's life, he saw something in her eyes that he had never seen before. Fear. She told him he didn't understand. That it was complicated. That it was best left alone. But Ethan had come too far to stop now. He pressed. He pushed. He told her he had the right to know. That was when her demeanor shifted. The fear turned to something else. Something closer to anger. Her voice rose, sharp and unsteady. She told him he had no idea what he was messing with. That some things were meant to stay buried. That he was making a mistake. Then came the moment Ethan would replay in his mind over and over again. His mother clutched at her chest, her breath hitching. Her face went pale, then twisted in pain. She tried to stand but collapsed before she could take a step. The sound of her body hitting the floor was deafening in the silence that followed. For a moment, Ethan was frozen, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. Then, he was at her side, shaking her, calling her name. Detective Laura Martinez stood in the Thompson living room, scanning the space with a practiced eye. The house was quiet, untouched. No overturned furniture, no broken glass, no immediate signs of violence. It looked like an ordinary home, except for the motionless body on the floor and the tension lingering in the air like an aftershock. Margaret Thompson was gone. Ethan sat on the couch, his hands clasped together, staring at the floor. His sister, Sarah, stood near, but Margaret's replies were firm, almost cold. "We made our choice, Daniel. I cannot undo it. We agreed to move forward." Ethan felt his stomach turn as he read them again. A brother. A life that had existed parallel to his, yet completely separate. His mother had never spoken of it. Not once. She had erased that part of her life so thoroughly that even he, her own son, had never suspected a thing. When Martinez sat down with Ethan again, she watched his reaction carefully. He was angry, confused, lost in a whirlwind of emotions. But there was something else, guilt. Even though the autopsy suggested Margaret's death was medical, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he had caused it. That if he had never confronted her, if he had just let the past stay buried, she would still be alive. But Detective Martinez wasn't ready to close the case just yet. Margaret's phone records showed multiple calls to an unknown number in the weeks leading up to her death. The number wasn't registered under any name. When traced, it led to a burner phone, a dead end. But one call stood out: just hours before Ethan confronted her, Margaret had spoken to someone for nearly 20 minutes. Who was on the other end of that call? And what had they talked about? As word spread about the circumstances surrounding Margaret's death, the media descended on Maplewood like vultures circling fresh carrion. Headlines speculated about the long-buried family secret. Morning talk shows debated whether Ethan was to blame. Was he an innocent son seeking the truth, or had his relentless questioning pushed his mother to the breaking point? The public was divided. Some called him cruel, reckless. Others sympathized, saying anyone in his position would have done the same. Reporters camped outside the Thompson house, desperate for a statement, a new development, anything to keep the story alive. And then, a new name surfaced. Daniel Wright. Ethan's biological half-brother. The child Margaret had given away. And he had been in Maplewood the night she died. Ethan Thompson walked out of the police station a free man, but nothing about him felt free. The official ruling had come down: Margaret Thompson's death was the result of natural causes. No evidence of foul play. No charges. No trial. The case was closed. But outside, reporters still lined the street, microphones stretched toward him like weapons, cameras flashing. Questions were shouted over one another, demanding answers that Ethan himself didn't have. Did you push your mother too far? Do you regret confronting her? What do you have to say to those who blame you for her death? His jaw tightened, his fists clenched, but he said nothing. His silence became the headline the next morning. In the days that followed, public opinion shifted in every direction. Some saw Ethan as a man who had only wanted the truth, punished for his curiosity in the worst way. Others saw him as reckless, selfish, someone who dug up the past without considering the damage it could do. His mother had spent her entire life keeping her secret buried. Why couldn't he have let it stay that way? Social media was relentless. There were people who defended him, but there were also those who sent messages telling him he was responsible for his mother's death. Some were cruel. Others were almost worse, those who said they hoped he could forgive himself someday. As if they had already made up their minds that he never would. Detective Laura Martinez had done her job. The investigation had been thorough, every possibility examined. But something about this case lingered with her. Maybe it was the weight of it, the way family secrets could destroy a person even when no crime had been committed. Maybe it was Ethan himself, how he walked away with his name cleared but his life still in ruins. The media eventually moved on, as they always did. Another scandal, another crime, another breaking story to chase. But the damage had already been done. Ethan tried to go back to work, but the whispers followed him. His co-workers avoided eye contact. His neighbors looked at him differently. Even Sarah, his own sister, kept her distance. And then there was Daniel Wright. Ethan hadn't spoken to him. He wasn't even sure if he wanted to. But the knowledge of his existence sat in the back of his mind, refusing to be ignored. His mother had lied to him for his entire life, but was she wrong for doing it? Would things have been better if he had never known? Or would he have spent his whole life feeling that something was missing, never understanding why? People said the truth would set you free. But Ethan knew better now. Some truths only left you trapped. Ethan Thompson had only wanted answers. He never imagined those answers would come at such a cost. His mother's death wasn't a murder, not in the way the world understood crime, but it left destruction in its wake all the same. The truth he fought so hard to uncover had shattered the very foundation of his life, and now he was left standing in the wreckage, trying to make sense of what was left. Margaret had spent years protecting a secret she believed was better left in the past. Maybe she was right. Maybe she wasn't. But once that truth was unearthed, there was no undoing the damage it caused. Ethan had expected anger, confrontation, maybe even rejection, but not this. Not the silence. Not the guilt that clung to him like a shadow. Sarah struggled too. She had lost a mother in the most unexpected way, and her relationship with Ethan had changed forever. She didn't blame him outright, but something between them had cracked, and no amount of apologies or explanations could mend it. The town of Maplewood moved on, but the Thompson family never truly did. The home Ethan grew up in no longer felt like home. Every room carried echoes of the argument, of his mother's last moments, of the suffocating weight of what had been lost. And then there was Daniel Wright, the brother Ethan never knew he had. A living reminder of the truth his mother tried to bury. Ethan hesitated for weeks before reaching out. When he finally did, the conversation was strained, uncertain. Two men connected by blood but nothing else. They shared history, yet they were strangers. What was he supposed to do with that? There were no easy answers. No satisfying resolutions. Just lingering questions. How much truth is too much? When does the need for answers become dangerous? And if the past was buried, was it always meant to stay that way? Ethan had spent his life chasing the unknown, believing that knowledge was always better than ignorance. But now, he wasn't so sure. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true crime narratives. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Would you confront a loved one if you discovered a hidden family secret? Stay tuned for our next episode, where we delve into another compelling case. Thank you for watching.